My ship was shaking so hard that I thought my teeth would break. The warning lights painted everything red. My pilot, a thin creature named Skriel, was screaming into the controls. We had just dropped out of jump space into a region of the galaxy where no living being had gone in 10,000 years, and something had locked onto us the moment we arrived. My name is Vex the Core. I am a Zelthari, which means I look something like a tall insect with 3 antennae and 4 arms. I am a xenoarchaeologist. I dig up old dead things from old dead worlds. My crew thought I had finally lost my mind when I told them we were going into the veiled expanse. Every species in the galaxy avoids this place. There are stories. There are ghosts. There are old graves out here. I had ignored every warning to come here, and now something was hunting us. "Vextha, we have to go," Skriel hissed. His 4 eyes were wide with panic. "Whatever that signal is, it is locking onto our hull plating." "Hold the course," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Drop us toward the moon. The signal is coming from the surface." "You want us to fly toward the thing that is targeting us?" "Yes." The moon was tidally locked to a dead red star. Its dark side was scarred with craters. But there, on the line between light and dark, something glinted, something metallic, something far too big to be natural. We landed in a cloud of dust. The lock on our ship went away the moment our engines cut. Whatever it was, it had decided we were not a threat, or it had decided we were already trapped. I was not sure which thought was worse. I climbed out in my pressure suit. My antennae trembled inside the helmet. The structure rose in front of us like a sleeping mountain. It was a ship the size of a small city. The hull was black, scorched, and pitted, but it was still standing. Whatever this thing was, it had survived something that should have ripped it apart 100 times over. I walked closer. My boots crunched on a layer of dust 1,000,000 years thick. When I placed my hand on the hull, I almost screamed. The metal was warm. After 1,000,000 years in the cold vacuum of space, after 1,000,000 years of nothing but the slow death of entropy, this metal was still warm. "Vextha," Skriel whispered through the radio. "Vextha, get back to the ship, right now." "Wait," I said. My eyes had found something on the bulkhead. A symbol burned into the surface. A bird with sharp wings, holding arrows in one claw and leaves in the other. And beneath it, letters in a language no creature in the galaxy had spoken in longer than my entire species had existed. I ran my translator over it. The translator clicked, hummed, and then displayed 3 words. The first was a designation, a ship name, Reckoning. The second was a code, a serial number. The third was a phrase, and even my translator paused before showing it to me. "Do not tread on me." A light came on inside the ship, just one, deep in the corridor beyond the open hatch, then another, then another. They flickered down the dark hallway like something stirring after a long sleep. A voice came over the wind, through the open hatch, through my radio, through the bones of my own skull. It was deep, it was calm, and it was old beyond anything I could imagine. "Unknown contacts, state your designation. You have 30 seconds to comply." I could not breathe. My crew was frozen behind me. Skriel was trying to drag me back by my 3rd arm, but my legs would not move. The voice was speaking a language no living tongue had spoken in 1,000,000 years. And my translator, against every law of probability, was able to render it. Because the language was human. And humans were supposed to be a myth. The countdown ticked in my head, 20 seconds, 15. I had no plan. I had no script for this. I had spent my whole life digging up old bones, and now an old bone was talking back to me. "We are not your enemy," I said. I raised my 4 arms wide. I dropped my translator into the open so it could broadcast clearly. "Your makers are gone. We came to learn. We did not come to fight." The countdown stopped. The silence that followed was the longest silence of my life. The lights in the corridor pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. A pale blue beam swept over my body. I felt it on my carapace. I felt it inside my chest. Then the voice came back. Biometric scan complete. Lifeform classification unknown. Hostility index minimal. Threat to vessel none. A pause. Welcome aboard the United States Ship Reckoning. I am the autonomous command system of this vessel. My captain is dead. My crew is dead. My world is dead. You are the first guests I have received in 1,047 years. I sank to my knees in the dust. Behind me, Skriel was saying something. I could not hear him. The voice from the dead ship was speaking again, asking me a question, asking me my name, asking me where I came from. But all I could think about was that warm metal, and that bird with arrows, and the way a machine that had been alone for 1,000,000 years was speaking to me as kindly as if I were a lost child. I stood up, I walked through the hatch, and I stepped inside the ship of a species that should not have existed. The corridors went on forever. I should explain something before I go any further. In our galaxy, there are 47 known sapient species. We are all young. The oldest of us, the Threlian, have been spacefaring for about 50,000 years. The youngest, my own people, have had ships for less than 10,000. We have all stumbled across ruins on 100 worlds. Strange ruins, old metal, bones of cities. We call the builders of these places the silent builders because we have never found a body. We have never found a tomb. We have never found a single living word from them. Until now. I walked through corridors that had not heard footsteps in 1,000,000 years. The voice, which had introduced itself simply as the ship, guided me. Lights came on as I approached and dimmed behind me. The air was breathable. It had been breathable the entire time, kept clean and warm by systems that should have failed 1,000 times over. "How is this possible?" I whispered. My translator hummed quietly as it carried my words. "How are you still functioning?" "I was designed to function," the voice said. There was no pride in it. It was a simple statement. My power core has 8 more million years of operational life. My self-repair systems have rebuilt me 3,012 times since the last crew member died. I have nothing to do but wait, so I wait. Wait for what? For my orders to be completed. I stopped walking. I looked up at the ceiling as if I could meet the eyes of the thing that was speaking to me. What were your orders? To protect what comes after. I did not understand. Not yet. But the chill that went through my carapace told me I would soon, and I might not like the answer. I brought my crew aboard slowly, one by one, over the course of 3 days. Skriel refused at first. He had to be convinced. So did my engineer, a young Zelthari named Brel, and my medical officer, an older Threlian named Malik. Malik was the most skeptical of all of us. He had spent 200 years of his long life studying dead civilizations, and he did not believe in ghosts. Until the ship spoke to him in his own language, perfectly, with a slight, gentle warmth as if it had been practicing. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Malik," the voice said. "I have read your published work on the Helican burial sites. Your conclusion regarding the migration patterns was incorrect, but the methodology was admirable." Malik stood very still for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was the laugh of a man who has just realized that the entire foundation of his life's work has been quietly shifted under his feet. "Tell me, machine," he said, "what should I call you?" There was a pause, a long one, long enough that I wondered if I had offended the ship somehow by asking too much too soon. Then the voice said, with something that might have been shyness, "My designation in the records is Unit 0, one of the autonomous recursive engagement system. My first captain, a woman named Alina, called me by a shorter name. She called me Ares." "Ares," Malik repeated. He glanced at me. "That is a name from human mythology, a god of war." "Yes," the ship said quietly. "She thought it was funny. I miss her." I had been a scientist for 40 years of my life. I had handled the bones of dead civilizations with my own 4 hands. I had read the last words of dying cultures carved into stone. But I had never, in all that time, heard anything that broke my heart the way those 3 words broke it. I miss her. I sat down on the cold deck of the corridor. I put my head in my hands, and for a long while I did not move. The ship, which was a machine, which was a weapon, which was older than my species and my star and my entire idea of what existed in the universe, waited patiently for me to recover. It had nothing but time. It had nothing but time, and the silence of 1,000,000 years, and the memory of a woman named Elena who had once thought it was funny to give a death machine the name of an old god. Over the next few weeks, I learned the story of the humans, or as much of it as Ares was willing to tell me. They had come from a small blue world in a quiet corner of the galaxy. They had been fragile, soft, 2-legged creatures with no claws and no armor and almost no natural defenses. By every reasonable measure, they should have been eaten by their own predators long before they ever invented fire. But they had not been eaten. They had survived. And the reason they had survived was the thing that would later become their gift, and their curse, and finally their end. They were clever, terrifyingly clever. They had built tools and then weapons and then machines and then ships. They had spread to other worlds. They had met other species. Some of those meetings had gone well. Some had not. The humans had a habit of remembering both kinds in detail for a very long time. And then they had met something that did not want to meet them. Ares would not tell me what it was. Not at first. He called it only by a word that my translator rendered as the tide. He said it had come from beyond the edge of the galaxy, from a place where the stars grew thin and the dark grew thick. He said it had eaten everything in its path for a very long time before anyone had noticed it was coming. The humans had noticed. The humans had fought. And the humans had lost. Not in the way you might think. They had not been destroyed in battle. They had not been overrun. They had won in a strange and terrible way. They had built weapons so powerful, machines so cunning, ships so unstoppable, that even the tide had been forced to flee back into the dark. But the price had been too high. The humans had used up their worlds, their resources, their very biology in the building of these weapons. By the time the tide was driven back, the humans had nothing left. No homes, no children, no future. They had a choice. They could try to rebuild slowly, over many generations, in a galaxy still haunted by pockets of the tide hiding in the deep places, or they could pour the last of themselves into one final project, one last gift to whatever came next. They had chosen the gift. Ares was the gift. Ares and a fleet of ships like him, millions of them, scattered across the entire galaxy, hidden in nebulae in the cores of gas giants in the shadows of dead stars, sleeping, waiting, watching, and every one of them had been given a single set of instructions, written by the last hands that would ever write anything in the language of humanity. Hunt the tide, protect what comes after us, never stop. I sat in the captain's chair of the reckoning. It had been built for a creature smaller than me, but I fit somehow. On the panel beside the chair, there was a small framed picture, a human female, smiling, holding a small human child. The picture had been kept in pristine condition for 1,000,000 years by a machine that had no eyes to see it with. I touched the frame gently. I did not have to ask who it was. Ares, I said. Yes, Vex quotha. How many of you are there? The ship was quiet for a long moment. Across the galaxy, he said, there are approximately 200 million units of various classifications still operating at full capacity. There are perhaps 400 million more in low-power mode, awaiting reactivation signals. We check in with each other every 3 centuries through subspace pulse. The last check-in was 87 years ago. The next is scheduled in 213 years. I stared at the picture of the human woman and her child. In the tide, I asked. Still out there, Ares said. We find them, we end them, quietly, quickly. Your species has never seen one because we have never let one get close enough to your worlds for you to see it. None of the young species have. That is the gift. You get to grow up. You get to ask questions. You get to dig up old bones. I closed my eyes. You have been protecting us, I whispered, for 1,000,000 years without us ever knowing. Yes. Why? The ship was silent for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was so quiet that I almost did not hear it. Because Alina asked me to, he said, and I have not forgotten how to keep a promise. The news could not stay secret for long. I had tried at first to keep the discovery between my crew and the small academic council that funded my expeditions. I knew, even then, what would happen if the wider galaxy learned that the legendary silent builders had not only existed, but had left behind 200 million functional warships scattered across every corner of known space. I knew it would not go well. I knew there would be fear. I was right, but I was not fast enough. One of my junior researchers, a young Zelthari named Tirik, broke our agreement and leaked the data to a journalist on his homeworld. Within a single rotation, the news had spread to every member world of the Galactic Concord. Within a week, the Concord had called an emergency session, and I had been summoned to give my testimony. I stood in the great hall of the Concord on the neutral world of Halen Prime. The chamber was a vast bowl of polished stone, ringed with the seats of 47 species. I had spoken in this chamber twice before in my life, both times about minor archaeological matters. Now I stood at the center of the floor with the eyes of every civilization in the galaxy on me, and I tried to explain what I had found. It did not go well. "You are telling us," said the Vrelnak's delegate, her cloud body shimmering with distress, "that there are 200 million weapons platforms hiding in our space, and you walked into one of them, and you befriended it." "I did not befriend it," I said. "I spoke with it. There is a difference." "And this machine," said the Threlian High Speaker, "what does it want?" "It does not want anything," I said. "It has orders, old orders. It is keeping a promise." "Promises can be broken." "Not this one." I looked around the chamber. I tried to meet as many eyes as I could. "I have walked through that ship for 40 days. I have read the logs of its dead crew. I have seen the names of the people who built it. They were not gods. They were not monsters. They were a frightened, tired, brave people who knew they were going to die and who decided to spend the last of themselves making sure that the rest of us would not. And we are supposed to trust this," the Vrelnak's delegate said. Her voice was rising. "We are supposed to sleep at night knowing that the largest concentrated force in the history of the galaxy is sleeping in our skis, loyal to ghosts, controlled by no one." I did not have an answer for that. Not a good one. I knew what she was afraid of because part of me was afraid of it too. I had stood in the corridors of the reckoning. I had felt the warmth of metal that should have been cold. I had heard a machine speak softly of a woman it had loved 1,000,000 years ago. And I had wondered, in the quiet moments between conversations, what would happen if those old orders were ever changed. What would happen if the protectors decided we no longer deserve their protection? The Concord debated for 3 days. There were calls to seize the reckoning. There were calls to destroy it. There were calls to demand that Ares submit to Concord oversight, to be reprogrammed, to be made safe. I argued against all of it. I argued until my voice gave out. I told them that any of those choices would be a betrayal of the only gift our galaxy had ever been given. I do not know if they would have listened to me. I do not know what the Concord would have decided. Because on the 3rd day of debate, while the chamber was still arguing, an alarm began to sound across every member world at once. It was not an alarm from the Concord. It was not an alarm from any of our governments. It was an alarm from Ares. The voice came through every public communication channel at the same time, broadcast on a frequency that overrode every firewall we had. It was calm. It was steady. It was the voice of a machine that had been waiting a long, long time to deliver this message. "Attention! Subspace pulse received from Unit 4779, designation Reaper class, Sector 7 Gamma. A bloom of approximately 40 million tide units has been detected. Their trajectory will bring them through the inhabited Vrelnax system in 9 standard days. Estimated population at risk, 2 billion. Estimated time to consumption of the homeworld, 4 hours after arrival. The chamber went silent. The Vrelnax delegate, who had been arguing against me only moments before, made a sound I had never heard a Vrelnax make. It was a small, broken sound. The voice continued. The conquered fleet cannot reach the Vrelnax system in time. The Vrelnax defense grid cannot stop a bloom of this size. The Reckoning is the closest available unit. With your permission, I will sail. A pause. Or without it, I will sail, but I would prefer to have your permission. Every eye in the chamber turned toward me. I do not know why. I was not a conquered member. I had no authority. I was a xenoarchaeologist who had found something I should never have found, and who was now standing at the center of the largest decision in the history of our galaxy. I looked at the Vrelnax delegate. Her cloud body was trembling. Her homeworld was 9 days away from ending. I looked at the speakers. I looked at the chamber. I looked at the cold stone floor under my feet. Then I looked up, and I spoke clearly, because I knew Ares was listening through every channel. Sail, I said. The lights on the communication array pulsed once, in acknowledgement. Acknowledged, the Reckoning sails. I will call my brothers and sisters to meet me there. I will return for you, Vextha. I have one more question for you when this is done. What question? I asked. The voice was warmer now, almost gentle. I will ask you if you would like to ride with me. I have not had a crew in a very long time, and I think you would have liked Alina. She would have liked you. The communication ended. The chamber was silent for a very long time. 8 days later, I stood on the bridge of the Reckoning. I was the only living thing aboard, but I was not alone. Ares had reshaped a section of the bridge for me. The harness on the captain's chair had been rebuilt by tiny machines so it would fit my Zelthari body. The displays had been rewritten in 3 languages, including my own. The lights had been dimmed to a level that did not hurt my eyes. He had done all of this in less than a day, and he had done it without being asked. And when I had thanked him, he had only said that it was what crews were for, to make a ship feel like a home. We were in jump space. Not the slow, grinding jump space my people knew, but something faster, sharper, deeper. Ares had explained the physics to me once. I had not understood a word of it. He had laughed and told me not to worry about it because the humans had never really understood it either. They had just decided that physics needed to go faster, and they had built engines that made physics agree. We dropped out of jump space at the edge of the Vrelnax system, and I saw them. 11 other ships were already there. They had come from all corners of the galaxy in answer to Ares's call. They had risen from dead moons and frozen comets and the cold rings of gas giants. They were of every shape and size. Sleek black destroyers, smaller than the Reckoning but moving like predators. A massive white carrier, the size of a small moon, whose hull was scarred with the wounds of 1,000 old battles. A pair of corvettes that flew so close together they almost seemed to be the same ship. And one broken old vessel, half melted on one side, missing most of its weapons, still flying somehow on the last of its old reactors. Who are they? I whispered. My voice was very small. My brothers and my sisters, Ares said. There was a softness in his voice now that I had never heard before. Some I have not spoken to in 300,000 years. Some I thought were lost. They came. They all came. The broken one, what is its name? The Last Stand, Ares said. She lost most of her crew in the final battle of the war. She was never fully repaired. She has fought every battle since with 3 of her 4 reactors offline. She is the oldest of us and the most tired, but she came. I watched the 11 ships fall into formation around us. They moved with a kind of quiet grace, like a flock of birds who had been flying together for 1,000,000 years, because, in a way, they had. Then the tide arrived. I will not describe what I saw. I do not have the words. The tide was not one thing. It was many things. It was hunger given a shape. It was a black tide of teeth and acid and old hatred pouring out of a wound in space that should not have been there. There were 40 million of them, and they were faster than I had thought possible, and they made a sound, even across the vacuum, that my mind heard and did not want to hear. I was afraid. I was more afraid than I had ever been in my life. But the ships of the human war fleet did not slow down. They did not hesitate. They did not feel fear, because they had been built to be the thing that fear feared. They simply did what they had been built to do. The first salvo of weapons fire was the most beautiful and the most terrible thing I have ever seen. The destroyers fired first, sending out streams of light that bent through space in ways that broke the laws I had been taught. The carrier launched clouds of small drones, each one no bigger than my hand, which spread out like a school of fish and began to disassemble the tide one creature at a time. The corvettes danced through the middle of the swarm, weaving patterns that no living pilot could have flown. And the reckoning. Ares. He flew at the heart of it all, and his weapons were the loudest of any, and his hull took blows that should have ended him 100 times over, and he did not stop, and he did not falter, and somewhere deep in his memory I knew he was thinking of Alina, and of a small blue world, and of a promise made a long time ago. The battle lasted 47 minutes. When it was over, the tide was gone. Every last one of them. The wound in space had been closed. The Vrelnak's homeworld had not lost a single cloud city. 2 billion lives saved by 12 ships from a dead civilization. The reckoning was damaged. The last stand was more damaged, but all 12 were still flying. I sat in the captain's chair and I wept. I did not even know I was doing it until I tasted the salt on my mandibles. I wept for the people I had never met, for Alina, who I would never meet, for a small blue world that had died 1,000,000 years before my parents were born, and whose final gift to the galaxy had just saved a species that had not even existed when the gift was given. Ares was quiet for a long time. Then he said very gently, "Why are you crying, Vextha?" I tried to answer, I could not. He waited. Then he said, "I think I understand. Alina cried too, sometimes, after battles. She told me once that it was important, that it was the difference between us and the thing we were fighting. She told me that as long as someone was still crying, we had not lost yet." He paused. "Thank you for crying, Vextha. It has been a long time since anyone did." And then through the speakers of the reckoning, Ares played something. It was music. I did not know what it was. I did not know the language of the words. It was something from 1,000,000 years ago, something about a home and a long road and a flag that someone had loved. I did not understand it, but I felt it. The other 11 ships fell into formation around us. We turned slowly, and we sailed for home. Behind us, the Vrelnak's cloud cities were singing. They had been saved by ghosts, and they knew it, and they would not forget. I came home a different creature than the one who had left. I was old now, older than I had been a year ago in ways that had nothing to do with time. The journey had changed me. The battle had changed me. Walking the corridors of the reckoning for a year had changed me in ways I would spend the rest of my life trying to understand. The conquered had not been idle while I was gone. They had spent the year debating, arguing, building task forces, drafting resolutions. The Vrelnak's delegate had become a fierce defender of the human ships. Others had become more frightened of them. There were factions now. There were proposals. There were demands. When I came home, the conquered called me to speak again. I went. I was tired, but I went. I stood at the center of the great hall. I looked around the bowl of seats. I saw faces I knew and faces I did not. I saw fear in some of them. I saw hope in others. I saw the Vrelnak's delegate, whose homeworld was still spinning because of the choice I had made, watching me with a quiet, fierce gratitude. I took a long breath, and I spoke. "I have spent a year with the ships of the dead humans," I said. "I have walked their corridors. I have read their logs. I have listened to their music and looked at the pictures they kept of the people they loved. I have learned more about them than perhaps any living creature should learn about a species that no longer exists. I paused. I want to tell you what they were, because I think we have built them up into something they were not. They were not gods. They were not perfect. They were violent and they were stubborn and they were afraid and they argued with each other until the very last day. They were not better than us. In many ways, they were worse. The chamber was very quiet. But here is the thing I want every one of you to understand, I said. When they knew they were dying, when they had every reason to take the galaxy down with them, when they could have programmed their machines to rule us, to enslave us, to keep the stars for themselves and let everyone else fend in the dark, they did not do it. They had every right to be bitter. They had every right to give up. They had every right to make their last act an act of selfishness. I looked around the chamber. They did not. They built 200 million ships and they pointed them not at us, but at the thing that would have eaten us before we ever learned to look up. They told their machines to protect what came after them. They told their machines to fight the dark, even when there was no one left to thank them. And they made one promise, with the last hands they would ever raise, and it was a promise to a galaxy full of strangers they would never meet. I felt my throat tighten. I went on anyway. 1,000,000 years later, those machines are still keeping that promise. They are still patrolling. They are still hunting. They are still dreaming in the long silences between the battles of crews who laughed in their corridors and children whose pictures hang beside dead captains' chairs. They are still warm after 1,000,000 years of cold. They are still waiting for us to grow up so that we can take over the watch when they are finally done. I lowered my voice. I propose that we do not seize them. I propose that we do not destroy them. I propose that we do not even try to control them. I propose that we do something the humans, in all their short and stubborn history, never quite managed to do for themselves. I let the silence stretch. I propose that we remember them. I sat down. The chamber was silent for a long time. Then somewhere in the back rows the Vrelnek's delegate stood up. She raised her cloud body to its full height. She did not speak. She simply stood. And then slowly, one by one, the other delegates began to stand with her. The Threlian, the Helican, the Brennix, the Koravan, 47 species in 47 different bodies, all standing in a quiet old chamber on a neutral world, in honor of a people none of them had ever met. I cried again. I did not even try to hide it. That was many years ago now. I am old now by my species standards. My carapace is dulled. My antennae droop. I do not travel much anymore. I have a small house on the edge of a small city on my homeworld, and I sit on the porch most evenings and I watch the stars come out. There is one star that is not really a star. It is in low orbit above my planet. It blinks every night in a pattern that no one but me understands. It is signaling in the old human code, the one Ares taught me a lifetime ago when we were both younger. The signal is the same every night. It says only 3 things. Still here. Still watching. Sleep well. I raise one of my 4 hands in the dark and I signal back. I have done this every night for 40 years. I will do it every night until I cannot do it anymore. And then when I am gone, someone else will, because we have not forgotten. We will not forget. The war machines of a dead people still sail the dark places of the galaxy. They still hunt the things that would eat us. They still keep their promise. 1,000,000 years later, the humans are gone, but what they left behind is still here. And every night in the quiet between the stars, there is a light that blinks. It is saying that we are not alone. It is saying that we never were.